Hi, this is Privateer Station, and today we're bringing you day 643 of Russian war with Ukraine. As always, with former advisor to the Office of the President of Ukraine, Lieutenant Colonel Alexey Arestovich, and this time he's in the company of Nikolay Feldman, Ukrainian journalist. Today's stream is dedicated to a very curious question: why there is still no battle plan for 2024 in Ukraine. Also, the original stream was over 2 hours long, so we'll split it in several segments. Our sincere thanks go to our members and supporters. So today, thank you, Klaus Perditis. You've been the rock through this, I think, year and a half already that you've been with us. And of course, Bill, your super thanks definitely help. Much appreciated. With this, let's deep dive into day 643. Enjoy. Hello, everybody. This is Project Alpha. My name is Nikolay Feldman, and you're watching War Diary with Alexey Arestovich. Hello, Alexei. Alexei is connected to our studio. Good evening. Alexei is now in the United States, and yes, his visa apparently was not annulled. Is it so, Alexei? Yes, I am in the US. I don't know if they let me in by mistake or something. Right, that happens. All right. Let's announce all the fundraisers that we are doing today. One of them is dedicated to an American vet who died in Ukraine, Drew Weber. He's a professional military. He has a lot of medals and awards from United States. He has been to several missions in different hotspots of the planet. He was one of the brightest figures of the American volunteer movement in Ukraine, and he died defending Ukraine. An American died defending our country. He is survived by a wife and two little kids. Since it was a volunteer mission for him, there is no aid from the government, so there is no compensation for that. Their friends are supporting them. So this is a special appeal to our American and English world listeners. I was told that this link you guys can definitely use in the United States that we're putting under the stream. I have a big ask for you to please support this fundraiser. He was a very open-hearted man with a very bright soul, and he had done a lot personally to defend our country, our freedoms. So again, please, a big request to support his family. Every dollar matters here, especially with two little kids. All right, I did try to use the link and send some money from Ukraine to that link. It doesn't work for us from within. So this definitely is a link for our international and American viewers. And for Ukrainians who are watching the stream, we have a special fundraiser for night vision equipment. They're asking only for 160,000. One of the troops that is fighting near Avdiivka, you guys are already, as we starting, closed 120 out of those. So just continue supporting it, and let's close it during our stream. Let's go to the rest of the agenda today. And since it's been quite a few days from the previous stream, maybe let's start from the review of the front. But you tell us if it is needed to take a look at the map. Yes, Nikolai, I think it is time to take a look at the map. Okay, so let's start with Kherson, Perch. Right, there is an information that a newly created 104th Paratroopers Division under General Teplinsky, the head of paratroopers of Russian military. It is moving to take defense closer to Crimea. That information appeared in the media today, and people started asking questions. Are they seriously thinking to move away from Kherson to the mouth of Crimea? This is not so. This what they're doing there, they're actually creating a second line, a fortified line closer to Crimea as additional support in case they do need it. And the story actually is a rather dangerous indicator, meaning that they seriously taking our situation, our advancement on the left bank, and they're ready to add more resources to kick our troops from the left bank back into the water. And today, so-called governor of that occupied region made a statement that, of course, we do want to return to Kherson, and we're working with Putin together to figure a way how to take it back again from Ukraine. So they definitely are voicing these intentions here. We need to understand that it is rather difficult for our troops to maintain this side of the river. And probably next time, what we'll do, we'll be doing a fundraiser in the next stream to support Kherson troops because they are surviving a rather hard pressure from Russian occupants, and they will have to survive an increasing pressure in the future. Yesterday, Yura also was doing a fundraiser for our troops on that side. We only have an advantage in artillery on that side that they are located on a higher right bank, so they're targeting Russian resupplies as it gets to the front. And Russians have advantage in terms of numbers. They have at least 3 brigades working against our group that is holding the perch on the left side. But we're still holding. This is a very serious situation, but we're still holding and causing serious damage to the enemy. Let's continue. By the way, detachments of 810th Marine Corps was sent from Tokmak, the Russian Marine Corps. They probably decided that Kherson part is more important than this Tokmak area of fighting, so they decided to maneuver some troops or reserves from that side to Kherson, or perhaps they were making a difficult choice that they do need troops everywhere, but they decided to fortify Kherson side. I sent you a picture in WhatsApp, Nikolay, a photo of Andrew. So next time when we'll be announcing the fundraiser, let's bring this photo up. Let's continue with the front. So in Tokmak, you can see our troops cleaned up the western and eastern flanks a little, and they're going from Robotina towards Kapani, a little bit south of that. So these are the fights of the tactical caliber. It doesn't mean that they're less hard, but in the grand scheme of things, they're still a tactical event. Let's go further to Vugledar. We have continuous tactical fights, engagements near Novoselka and near Vugledar. There is no serious change of the front there. Everything is so-called local skirmish, local fights. Russians trying to achieve certain tactical goals here, but there's no big change. It doesn't mean there are no serious fighting. The fighting is rather intense, and both sides suffer casualties. But still, it's tactical because the distances are about half a kilometer, a kilometer. They're just paid with a high price tag of lives. Now let's go to Avdiivka. A lot of other experts also chimed in, including Alexey, who is also covering that area. That situation there is dire and very pessimistic in terms of our abilities to hold Avdiivka. I actually voiced my opinion quite a while ago that we probably will not hold it just by the fact that Russia has overwhelming majority of troops over advantage of troops over us. Many people don't understand that Russians still have advantage over us in artillery, in armored equipment, and by the way, that distance in the corridor between the north and the south of Russian troops is rather small. It's under 10 miles, so mortar can shoot from one side to another. Now, there was some news that Russians actually entering Avdiivka, but that is not being confirmed by Ukrainian side. But how should I say delicately? They do have a huge advantage in terms of numbers, and they're starting another wave of attempts to capture Avdiivka, and they provide for local overwhelming force to try to capture parts of Avdiivka. And we are working on both destroying their army and military, and we're trying to leave Avdiivka before they close the flanks completely and before the encirclement is done, or before it becomes a complete death valley in terms of the shootout. So I think our troops understand that just fine, and there were some notions that we're doing some successful counter attacks there, which is good in Avdiivka industrial zone. But this is the element of active defense. Let's go further north to the south of Bakhmut. They again have concentrated more troops and they are pushing us back. So remember, we took back Kordyumov, Kandriivka, and Klishchiivka, and we took railroad as an important barrier and went to the other side. Now this is a problem area because, according to Russians, again, our troops are pushed rather further back away from the railroad to the left. And again, this is due to a number of counter-offensive actions that they're doing and just pressing us due to the intensity of using heavy artillery and continuous waves of human infantry that they're sending over and over again. So we can see that the situation is being played back again. Our troops at a high cost have pushed the enemy in the south further from Bakhmut, and now they concentrated again. Additional reserves were brought into that front side, and they're pushing us back, and to a degree they're successful. So again, situation is very complex, and we should refrain from being overly optimistic in that regard. Now let's go north to Srebranskoye Lesnichestvo, or Silver Forestry in English. The fights continue here in the remnants of the forests, and the front line holds, but it holds at a huge price because they are rather intensively attacking us on this side, but we're holding. Now let's go north. More efforts are concentrated to the north of Kupiansk. You can see two arrows pressing down. They're trying to push our troops further down south. And both sides go into counter-offensive activities, maneuvers here. And it is very intense, but it is the fight for platoon-level entrenchments. So again, not an easy fight for us because enemy also has overwhelming use of aerial attacks, FPV drones, Landsets, which makes a difficult situation for our troops even more difficult. So this is overall the position of the front line. Thank you, Alexei. Thank you for what's going on there. I understand that all that we just discussed basically fits in the framework of the oppositional warfare, right? Indeed. It is an oppositional stalemate, and we are the side that is rather passively defending ourselves. We're almost not attacking anywhere. All right. In the recent week, there were news, a lot of them touching about General Zaluzhny. And the first thing that I want to bring to light is the post by General Zaluzhny that he is taking part in the Ramstein meeting for the first time since the beginning of war. Even for me, although I do, I think, track the news related to everything around this war, it was a surprise that he hasn't taken part in Ramstein before. And it happened after Minister of Defense of the United States Lloyd Austin visited Ukraine, Kiev, and met with Zelensky. And then this news came up. So I have a simple question. How these negotiations were conducted in earlier Ramstein groups without Commander-in-Chief Zaluzhny participating in them? So he was forming the order, the request, and there are several groups working abroad, outside of Ukraine, where our military experts coordinate the logic of military support. But Minister of Defense of Ukraine, Reznikov, and now Umerov, who are representing Ukraine, usually partook in Ramstein. And according to legislative acts, they are the ones to represent Ukraine in such negotiations and meetings. So the question is whether he was necessary, whether he was required at these meetings, as long as he was represented by aides and his message was delivered. So that's probably not too big of a deal. I wouldn't make a fuss about it. But it seems that he actually wanted to participate in this, and I don't know if he was facing any barriers to go and meet in Ramstein format. But fact remains fact, he has never been there until now. So all that is actually, I think, kind of falling into the whole story of the end of the year. There were statements made by David Arachamia and Mariana Bezuglia that Zaluzhny has not presented the plan of defense for 2024, and we will talk about that separately. It deserves attention. But this is all in the framework of the end of the year. America wants to know Ukrainian demands for the next year, and they basically are logical conclusion if you look at the plan of Ukraine defense for 2024. So they wanted to probably listen to Zaluzhny in person and his opinion as the commander-in-chief of Ukraine military forces. How is he going to fight in 2024 on the professional language? Basically, have a professional discussion among the experts. And this is my hypothesis, one of them, that he was probably requested to come in person. Austin probably visited Ukraine first to discuss certain things, and then they asked Zaluzhny to visit Ramstein. I think this was the main logic of this. Well, given that Zaluzhny accentuated attention on this event himself, that it's his first time, it shows his attitude to not going for whatever reason to earlier Rammsteins that he finally got to do it. You know, Nikolai, I have not seen the attitude in his statement. He just relayed the fact that he is attending. If he gave any judgmental add-on to that statement, I'm finally being allowed to, I haven't been let before, then maybe yes. But he's not allowing himself to take a political position because he's a commander-in-chief of the country at war. Okay, let's reformulate some parts of these questions. Sorry about the lag in communication here. So, do you think it's right or not that Zaluzhny didn't partake in Rammstein's personally before? I think that he should have been there, Nikolai. Maybe not in every Rammstein, but at least in every other. This is not a normal situation when you don't have commander-in-chief deciding on certain nomenclature. So the key Rammsteins, when the tanks are being decided or the jets are being decided whether they're supplied or not, I think he definitely should have been on those. And one needs to say that he has a very strong aura around him. So when he's in the room in person, he definitely, just that would have been a benefit for our side. He's a legendary man, not only in Ukraine, but also in the eyes of the West. So it would be beneficial for him to be there. This is my opinion. And thank you. I sorry interrupted you before there was a lag in our com. Please continue your thought. So many observers monitoring Zaluzhny, some of our Ukrainian talking heads, starting making a fuss about lack of political position from the army about the events unfolding. And here we get into a very delicate situation. How much army can openly declare its societal or political position during war? This is a key dilemma for Ukraine, actually, at this moment. Can army have a personal position as an institute? Can leaders of the military in Ukraine have their own political position? So he's holding for now. As a professional, he does not allow himself to make political statements being in active military service. But the logic of events unfolding is so that there'll be more and more questions coming of that caliber from people. Does the Zaluzhny army even have a position as an institute? Because why? When the logic is simple, when the loss of trust is progressing towards other institutes in the country, people turn to military as the institute that they trust. And sooner or later, their silence will start to play against them. And from the logic of corporate, from military professionals, they might be right, but from the logic of history, there'll be people questioning that silence because it's a serious question whether you define that or not. His position was defined in The Economist in his publication, where he said that army has done everything it could, and if you want to help us get out of strategic stalemate, you need to help us. And that was his position. As for the rest, look, Arachamia and Mariana Bezuglia, who started asking a lot of questions of the army, and as always, our dear Ukraine launched a Jackal Express on her. But if you read attentively, What is she writing about and what questions is she asking? These are the questions are rather matching in general with questions that the Western media is posing in front of Ukraine, such as how are you guys going to fight the war of 2024? And we are in a zone of unpopular decisions because President made another decision today, and during the previous decision-making group that President was assembling, some of his Telegram channels, I don't remember which one was actually posting that, but they made a point that about 4.5 million Ukrainian males are avoiding being registered for military service. And it's not a secret. Military know that, and in military Telegram channels, they're posting that they have an average about 30% of people refusing to serve, refusing to fight. In some detachments, it goes to even 70%. And at the same time, the channels of presidential office are broadcasting some indicators that they might start making hard decisions about global mobilizations or continuing the mobilization effort at large. Danilov tried to wrap it in a candy wrapper, saying that they're getting a marketing agency and recruiting companies, and we are returning the ones who already served back home, but we're doing a rotation. And people started to listen to all that, and the main reaction was, oh, they're again talking to us like to little kids, trying to do a dog and pony show, that they likely will return some of the people from the front back home, but they'll probably will drop down the age limit, the lower age limit. So as we're saying, as the military is saying, 50-year-old guys cannot run at the same pace for the same distance as the young guys. And we understand the consequences of these decisions. When the lower bracket will be lowered, the mothers of those conscripts that will be mobilized will understand the difference rather sharply, especially in the situation when the West is diminishing military aid. That'll mean that the casualties of our troops, especially in the infantry, will increase. If you don't have enough shells, if aviation and long-range missiles are further out, that means that infantry will be carrying it out on themselves with automatic rifles. And that'll be at a rather high cost. And perspectives of these decisions are so unpopular and so dire for the political leadership of the country that all these communications are telling about two things. First of all is that they start to understand the dire situation, and probably with the help of our professional military, who finally pressed their idea through that if you guys do not change the resupply mode with equipment and everything for us, we need you to supply us at least 20,000 troops monthly to hold the front. Second is that it's a big responsibility, historical, moral, societal, and it needs to be somehow distributed on somebody's shoulders. So they start looking back at Istanbul agreements. And that's another symptom of indicating that we are at a difficult position. And the way the Istanbul agreements are being brought, that we almost agreed to stuff, but Boris Johnson was really vehemently supporting us in continuing the war. So he was the proponent of war. And the logic is that we almost agreed, but you guys, the West, collective West, pushed us to the protracted war, and you did not provide us enough arms to fight it, which in a way is correct. Not in the part where dragged us into this protracted war. That is yet to be determined. I was a participant of the Istanbul group, but even I personally do not know how did that happen that we broke those negotiations. I heard a lot of emotional reaction after Bucha, that after Bucha we should not be doing it, but I remember that Russian side was insisting on these peace initiatives. And Istanbul peace initiatives were rather, I'd say, not bad. An intermediary document where many people were screaming about NATO status, we could never allow ourselves to do that. But, first of all, where is NATO? And will they take us in NATO? Because now Putin will definitely and is bringing it up as the condition that there's not going to be any NATO for Ukraine. That's the only that's one of the conditions, red line conditions for Russia. But If we would have agreed on that, perhaps we could have saved 300,000 lives, and probably half Ukraine would not be covered in landmines, and UAVs, those Shaheds, would probably not be dropping on our heads yet. So I'm not going in 2020 analysis, but just highlighting that perhaps it would have been a good decision to sign those, because the package we had then was rather beneficial. The Russian side was agreeing to even politically discuss the ownership of Crimea, so almost agreeing to their defeat. We're also forfeiting some things, but the number of their forfeitures was definitely bigger. And I don't see them going from that position into negotiations again. So the question, should we have fixed our victories back then or not, that would be a question for historians and future generations. It will be a question discussed. So once again, I don't know who exactly dragged us into that protraction of war, and President does know, so sooner or later he will have to give an answer. But when this second phase of this war started, we definitely did not get enough support. Today, Ben Hodges came out and reaffirmed that and said just this, that they did not give enough arms for Ukraine to win or fight this war. Because American army, if they had the same number of arms as Ukrainian army did, they would never have started counteroffensive. And there was also publication in Bild and other media about American plan to push Ukraine to negotiations with Russia, de facto by not supplying enough arms, which is enough to maybe defend itself, but definitely not enough for any counteroffensive actions. So that you guys can hold your pens, but you cannot run. And this is my principled position. I'm being here in the West, once again, reaffirming that. When the big war started, I don't know why it restarted in this format, but when it happened, we were not provided enough resources to win. Pro-Russian agenda in the Biden administration. Some people have wet dreams about the Western allies dreaming about destroying Russia. This is not so. They are not dreaming about that. They never had a plan to defeat Russia fully militarily. And they should also discuss this vision of the borders of 1991 with a battalion commander who is now fighting for a forest grove and losing his men in numbers for just holding a perch of our land. So the problem to formulate that is the West is not supporting us enough to win this war. There are no tanks in normal quantities. Aviation is still not here. Long-range missiles are not here. If they wanted us to prevail, we needed to have aviation back in the autumn of 22, and long-range missiles we needed yesterday. Let me disclose some information that I've never disclosed before. According to my data, when I was still an advisor, at the beginning of April of 22, we had 4 missiles for our MLRS systems Smerch in the whole Ukraine. And there was early April. First Ramstein was 26th of April, and first supplies that started coming in normal quantity were probably beginning of July, end of June. All that quarter of a year was carried on the shoulders of our infantry. 12, 18 hours non-stop artillery shelling in Popasna and Lysychansk, when against 60,000 Russian artillery shells, we could send maybe 3,000 of a different caliber that are not exactly flying well. And by the way, at that time, we did win over Russian cadre military. Remember, we destroyed their cadre military initially. But when the big war started, when the big protracted war started, the West should have helped us better. This is where we faltered. The supplies from the West, if you ask me how much we needed at least 5 times more, 3 to 5 times more than we were getting. And I am aware of what we were asking. We didn't ask for anything supernatural. We did not ask for 300 jets, F-16s, or 5,000 Datacams. We were asking for the minimums that we needed to defend the front line. And on average, we were getting, actually at most, we were getting 28% of what we asked. The usual volume was maybe 18%, 15%. And there are some, of course, reasonable excuses that shell production is limited in the West, but there are also subjective ones when some nomenclature was never supplied just because of the political decisions. So I'll make a stern statement here that I don't know how this large war will end, but the fact that we were dumped, the fact that we were not given enough resources to defend our territory and that we have to pay with our blood and our lives to replenish the missing nomenclature. But as one of my subscribers said, what else did you expect from allies who decided that it's the end of the world when the COVID pandemic broke out? When people gave up all their liberties that they fought for hundreds of years before and easily allowed themselves to be corralled and masked and set shut at home and face of the respiratory disease. So the West is definitely not in its best shape right now. It doesn't have Reagans or Thatchers there. And we also are in a difficult position in Ukraine because of corruption, because of our internal problems and lack of decision being made on time. Today, President came out and said that we will be building fortification lines. When? The F. On the second year of war, and after us screaming here for half a year already that we do need some fortifications. And these decisions should have been made a year and a half ago. They were not made timely, and they gave a chance for the West, for those people in the West who don't want to supply us enough arms, who are on that side of fence, and who want Ukraine to pay a higher price for winning in this war, or at least standing in this war. They provide a good reasoning for them, and a lot of Western media coming out with articles of this content. Well, we've been helping you, and we would be helping you further, but you've been so corrupt and you've been so inefficient in using our aid, and some of it even was stolen, that it didn't quite work, right? And we probably shouldn't be helping you much more. They are lying. We definitely we're not exactly white and fluffy. We definitely have a degree of corruption in Ukraine. I don't think we're stealing any of these supplies, but there definitely were mismanagement elements. But they are lying in the face of the number of supplies transferred. They never gave us enough supplies to actually satisfy the needs of the fighting front. But what we were doing, we did not pay enough attention to corruption. We probably a major fault of ours. We created a huge patriotic propaganda bandwagon that made a large part of society to believe that we can return to the borders of 1991. And this is such a fallacy. There are a lot of men, those 4 million men who are hiding and avoiding conscription. How many of them put a candle in the window in the Memorial Day of Holodomor and with the slogan "Never Again"? Right? But when the conscription time comes and registration for military service comes, they find ways and reasons to not do that. So those people who are screaming the loudest, let's get back to 1991 borders, we don't see them in the military detachments fighting on the front. And what is our strategic stalemate overall? First is the position of the West that wants to just bluntly pay with our lands and our blood for Russia not to lose drastically and not to jump in China's arms. So the parity would not be violated or rebalanced in favor of China against United States with Russia joining China. And also they're trying to avoid creating a gray zone on the place where Russia once was, with a lot of smaller countries with nuclear arms and stuff. I understand this is a goal, and there are just other means to achieve it. Because for now, they're achieving it with Ukrainian blood. Second is the dumbness and corruption of our political leadership. And third is our political propaganda, which has nothing in connection with reality, that is still making our citizens scream, "Oh, traitor, you are against the borders of 1991, you're agents of Moscow, you've sold yourselves to Putin." While what we? You think people in military and in a higher political leadership in Ukraine start talking about changing in mobilization plans? Because we are facing a problem. Less than half of conscripts of potentially usable people refuse to go. About 50% refuse to go. And I have friends fighting on the front. They're telling me the problem is dire. 30% is norm. of soldiers refusing to go to the front. Today, there was one of the main responsible people from the military. What's his name? General. His last name starts with A. A serious guy. All the elderly military remember him to be the head of the attestation commission that was sending war specialists to study abroad and was asking very serious questions. So he was talking about Sumy region, that mobilization is only complete at 8%. I'm 100% sure that the rest, the 92%, are screaming at each corner about the borders of 91. Anything but going to the front themselves. And that's huge fallacy supported by telemarathon and political leadership that's also screaming about the borders of 91, we will win. And at the same time, they're coming out and saying that mobilization is in a bad state and they need to hire recruiting companies to promote and advertise that. This is schizophrenia. Back in the day, Lyubomir Gusov said that our problem is morality and a lot of problems coming from it. I think our real problem is double morality, dual morality. There are differences in reality where we lie to ourselves, where we cannot connect things logically. And then there is a propaganda level where we are inflating the vision of ourselves to be the lightest, the best, the warriors of light. And that creates an immoral system on both ends. And that's where we are. Strategic inability of the West, immorality and disruption and schizophrenia in the Ukrainian society, and misunderstanding of what are we fighting for. Right now, we have confirmed in our society the so-called conflict Zaluzhny and Zelensky. Now look, that everybody is talking about, and what the government came out with, saying that since we cannot mobilize you at the necessary rate, since the West is not helping us to the level that we need to, since we do not have fortifications, we need 20,000 people every month. For what? To get them killed, giving them the same orders, sitting in the same groves, going push and pull. Like near Bakhmut, we captured the railroad back, and then Russians came and pushed us out. Is that what we're going to waste 20,000 for? And nobody can really criticize these decisions because otherwise you will be criticized for anti-patriotic position. The exit from this cul-de-sac is three-pronged. First of all, we need to change the position of the West. We have to and we must. That's what I'm doing here. We need to explain the perspectives of striking peace accord with Russia, or perspectives of what will happen if you continue to diminish aid to Ukraine. Because today there were some voices in the West coming out. Annalena Baerbock made a statement, and Germany chancellor came out and said that we cannot fully stop support of Ukraine, otherwise it will be a catastrophe. And there are some interesting notes, even from here, from Washington, that maybe they'll still do the voting before Christmas and Ukraine will get 61 billion in aid. But I want to say even that 61 billion is not enough to solve serious tasks. Today, we actually adopted a budget. So position of the West needs to be corrected and they need to be explained what will happen if Russia wins. Perhaps it's even better to let Russia suffer defeat and then go under China. Second is radical change internally, processes inside Ukraine, the system of our societal relations, at least in the higher levels of society, to increase the efficacy, because it's awful what's going on. And third is make sure we create the meanings for this war, for fighting for our land, that would diminish the amount of refusers to some reasonable number. When the soldier at the spot there in the trench will weigh these reasons in his mind and will understand that, yeah, for these things I can fight. I can fight for my land or I can fight for whatever idea. Problem is that it is a very complex way out. If you just do increase the Western aid, if you just increase the meanings of this war locally, this will not help us to come out victorious. We still need a three-pronged solution. But I'm skeptical. I think the West will still come around to help us stronger, but we probably will have to suffer through several serious lessons. And we will be the ones paying for these lessons. We have already paid a huge price for the current situation. I don't believe the efficacy of our government will increase to the needed level, and that will smack us straight head on into the wall, and we will have to resolve it. I don't believe politically it will be resolved. I think there'll be some revolutionary method. Not that there'll be Maidan 3 or some coup or something, but there'll be some, I want to say, extraordinary way that will change it. Because I don't believe in ordinary ways that will adapt the system to the current needs. Between surviving the country and stealing, current system will choose stealing. And third, adding meanings to our fight. And for example, if the West comes out and says, yes, guys, we guarantee you will be part of NATO, part of European Union. Today there were several votes for that, several voices coming out. They just need to prepare their members to go through that. And Stoltenberg said that, yes, decision to take Ukraine into NATO is ironclad, but still there are certain things that Ukraine needs to meet first. But at least this will allow us to add additional meanings. And Russian propaganda is joking at that. And they are very precise. They're targeting exactly this with their propagandist question. So what, Alex? Did your polls help you much? And then they just kind of refer to all the times when the West didn't help Ukraine. There were Poles, there were Austrians, there were Germans, there were Americans. So we need to find the meanings internally. What do we fight for? And explain it so well that out of these 4 million men that are evading service, at least one of them would return back and get registered for military service. Because if you put the current propaganda, the current meanings that if you don't go fight, Ukraine will lose its history and will be a satellite of Russia again, it doesn't work not because it doesn't have meaning, but because it's a part of a propaganda machine. And people take these conversations about new Bucha the size of the whole Ukraine, that there'll not be Ukraine, there'll be a big Holodomor, a big Holocaust for all Ukrainians. People just stopped perceiving that as threats. They've been mentioned too much. This is idiosyncratic messaging of official propaganda. That's what, unfortunately, we have done with these messages. So the strategic communication with our own people, we completely failed. And we need to do that, though, because when you have a meeting inside Ukraine, there'll be a meaning to increase the efficacy, because even bureaucrats, or some of them, will understand what are they doing for, what are they striving for. And then the West will also see that Ukraine finally has some logic and has some better ideas to what to fight for. There is a less amount of people avoiding being drafted. The economy is getting better. But I'm rather skeptical because, as I wrote today, our system of relations is rather feudal from the 17th century. It is very well honed to self-sustaining, but its economic efficiency is rather low. And it just means that a lot of people who are now being fed through that system, if we start getting things in order, will get kicked out to the street and will lose that source of income. So they'll be fighting back vehemently. And look, let's remind school history lessons. What happens when the system of economic relations of society is a mismatch to the civilizational task standing in front of them? Either the country collapses and dies, or the system of relations goes through a extraordinary evolutionary way. And I'm not sure how it will happen, but I can guarantee you 100% that that's what we'll have to do. And I gave you some keys to what will rattle the situation. Lowering the mobilization age. When moms will realize what's going to happen, I think the storm that will come out of it will be very impressive. And all that is a result of very dumb politics that was conducted for a while, a full catastrophe. Zelensky came to power promising to change the system of corruption, and as a result, he is now leading it. That feudal, corrupt system. And one can say it is a very superior task. It's a difficult task to solve, but still, he promised to. And what are we doing? By the end of the second year of this war, we are lowering the mobilization rank and we're starting to build fortifications. Okay, so we will be mobilizing 20,000 each month. What next? Well, yeah, problem is all of that doesn't add any fire in the eyes. A lot of military that you converse with, they tell directly that there is a continuous loss of life, and there are a lot of people who also just leave, and those who refuse to fight. And it's very difficult to plan military operations when there is all these processes happening. Plus, logistics is horrible, and you and I are doing the fundraisers for our front. Right, exactly what we're gathering the money for. We're gathering for night vision for the artillery intel. This is horrible. You know, I daily send some of my personal funds to support some of our troops. Nails, water, Starlink, a ton of these requests. I can send more, but the problem remains. It's a system issue. When your fighters come to you and say, we need nails and wood beams and plastic to equip our trenches, it just blows my mind. Guys, what are we talking about? How are we fighting this war? And excuse my military background, I do have connections on the front. I have commanders fighting throughout the front line, and they're coming to me telling me there are 30, 40, 70% of refusers. In the Storm Battalion, one of them, 70% of people refuse to go fighting. Borders of 1991, what are we talking about? And these systems are interconnected. The inability of a system to achieve their goals is covered by propaganda, and all that together prevents us from putting a serious question in front of the West, who promised us serious support but didn't give it to us. Not even enough for us to hold the territory that we have. And this is the trap how it works, because if we were honest with ourselves, if we were honest inside, we could communicate with the West honestly and openly on this topic. So how come we do cover you here? You are telling us that we are part of the West that is holding the brunt of this load and this war on our shoulders, and we're covering Europe for you. And in the meantime, in the last year, you bought for $550 billion worth of natural resources from Russia. Out of that, at least 150 billions will fall on our heads in the form of missiles. What's going on? You're telling us that we are defending you, and then you buy $500 billion worth materials? What is that? And now, if we come to them and ask these questions, they'll come back and say, well, you have corruption, you have unreal plans, you make your decisions slower, you just started to fortify on the second year, your military is ineffective, your societal systems are ineffective. So, regardless how much we give you, you guys are just ineffective, waste of resource. And that's the dilemma. For the West, Russia looks like heathens with resources, and we look like heathens without the resources. And in order for us to look like partners, maybe younger partners, but still, we need to stop doing things like heathens. We are bound, we need to stop stealing from our own soldiers, redirecting money to some unnecessary projects. And then we're also drumming up the goals of 1991, and the whole world owes us support. I'm saying we're not self sustainable. You know how you can discover if the post was written by Ukrainian in any language? Even if it is Swahili. You wouldn't read beyond 3 sentences before running into a word, either dignity or humiliation. You would definitely bump into one of those. These are our standard formulas of our dilemma. We always scream that we need to be conversed with like with big, responsible players at the table, that you need to respect us, that we're bleeding here and providing good for the whole world. And we're turning the world to the world with a question, guys, please respect us, please provide us support for all that. But in reality, we're so, to such a large degree, we're deceiving ourselves. We're not clear in our processes, we have inefficiencies, we have corruptions. Oh, yeah, and the third word, independence. And we are totally dependent upon the West. 2.3 trillion hryvnias deficit of a budget. Sorry, I said profit before deficit. So our system of dumb leadership, ineffective systems, and all that propaganda, it actually prevents us from having a serious conversation with the West, from whom we totally, utterly depend. This is how that works. This is how the system works that actually kills us daily. Soldiers and citizens of Ukraine dying from this war. And we'll be spilling even more blood unless we change these ways. And 2024 is not shaping up to be an easy year for us. And you can break that system only if you provide effect on all three elements of that system. First, stop lying. Second, make adequate decisions. And three, after having done that and put the right weights in this war, you can start communicating with the West. Seriously. Because without this, they will poke at our deficiencies and say, guys, you're like cargo cult. Building the plane from leaves and sticks in order to get a real plane. So, yeah, Alexei, here's a big problem. The way I see it is that many actions of the official Kiev are lying on the surface, and I'm more than sure that the budget of 2024, with a deficit of 2 trillion hryvnias, you can actually see the priorities that they outline. And usual analysts, we invited a couple to our studio, they've talked about that. They can see that far from all the resources are being sent to the front. All to the front, all for the victory, that's not about us. And all these strange conversations with journalists, and I think with Pritzker, there was another conversation that we have a sovereign right to send money the way we want to send, that we don't steal money from the money sent to us by our partners. We only sometimes have issues with our own funds. So, first of all, this is not true. Second, wait a second, are we allowed to steal our own money, our own budgets? So Russia has a concept of its sovereign democracy that pushes it to fight, and we have a sovereign financial independence that pushes us to steal. This all will end in a societal catastrophe, in my opinion, when literally the process in the war that's happening now is really killing us. That situation is killing us, and it will be resolved in some extraordinary fashion. It's a classic type situation when the tops cannot and the bottoms do not want to continue like that. The tops that on the second year of war are just starting to talk about fortification, and their best soldiers are dying there en masse on the front without having enough protection. This is ridiculous. I am surprised there are still people who believe that propaganda. I understand it works probably as a mechanism of psychological defense, and majority of our population probably would read that in paper, listen it on TV, and would say, yeah, the media are saying we can. So I'm not trying to criticize society at large. They're not called upon to have the skill set of a professional analyst or Harvard professional or journalist from Economist. But professionals, they see that. Economists and military guys, they see that we have institutional paralysis. Economists looking at our current situation saying that we're incapable of making the right decision and we're basically facing a collapse if we continue down this path. War puts serious asks in front of the country, and without solving these matters, we definitely will be going to the trash bin of history. But inability to push our society and leadership to understand the reality of Russian semi-victory on the front. If you lie so much inside internally, it makes very difficult to bring truth to you because there's just too much lies around you. All right, before we continue, I suggest let's do what you advised. Let's put the picture of Andrew Weber on this cast. So here it is. Here he is. That picture is taken in one of the war zones here in Ukraine. And we're gathering money for an American vet who died fighting for Ukraine, to his wife and two little kids. First of all, of course, our American and European and around the world listeners, those who can help, if you can donate to his family, there is a link at the bottom of the stream. He was an outstanding specialist a very good person, great personal qualities, and had done a lot to support Ukraine in the dire times. And he is survived by a wife and two kids. And yeah, this is basically one of the first links underneath this video. I think it is done through GoFundMe, and you guys can find it under the stream. The other collection that we announced, the other fundraiser that we announced at the beginning, has already closed. That's in the Ukrainian hryvnias. Thank you for night vision devices. And they actually recorded a message. We saw that in our personal messages. They recorded a big thank you to those who supported them. What else I think we need to mention? I suggest we continue in the context of all these news reasons that we announced. We have some questions around them, and I would suggest to walk around the news with clarifying questions throughout the whole agenda that we initially posted in the announce, and go through details and try to dissect that. But that will be in part 2. This is the end of part 1.